It was a calm afternoon, and Manny Pacquiao was enjoying some rare downtime. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the world champion's next move. Would he escalate the situation, or would his calm dignity turn the tide? The police officer's suspicions seemed to grow stronger with each calm word Manny spoke. Ignoring Manny's respectful tone, the officer stepped closer, his voice now sharper and more demanding. "Look, I don't have time for this. Show me some ID. Where are you from? What are you doing here, really?" The officer's questions were rapid fire, cutting through the peaceful park atmosphere like a knife. Manny reached into his pocket and handed over his ID without hesitation. "Here," he said softly. "I am Manny Pacquiao. I'm just here with my family." But the officer barely glanced at the ID. Instead, he folded his arms and stared down Manny as if he were hiding something. "I've never heard of you," he muttered. "You still need to answer my questions." Around them, people had begun to gather. The tension in the air thickened. A few individuals quietly pulled out their smartphones and started recording, sensing something unjust was unfolding. A mother nearby quietly hushed her children and whispered, "Look, it's a famous boxer, Manny Pacquiao." But most people didn't yet realize who the man was. Manny's wife, standing a few feet away, grew nervous. She glanced at Manny, her eyes pleading. "Maybe we should just leave," she whispered. "Don't make this worse." But Manny shook his head slightly, his expression firm but calm. "No," he said quietly. "We can't let this happen. Not like this." The officer's voice rose. "I'm asking the questions here, not you. Where are you really from? Are you here illegally? Are you causing trouble?" Manny took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I am a citizen. I live here. I work hard for my family and my community. But you don't look like the people around here," the officer snapped. "You stand out. That's suspicious." Some in the crowd began to murmur in discomfort. A young man, filming on his phone, spoke quietly to the person next to him. "This isn't right. Why is he being treated like this?" Another bystander whispered, "It's racial profiling." Manny's children clung to their mother, watching nervously. The youngest child looked up at Manny with wide eyes, sensing something was wrong, but unsure why. Despite the rising hostility, Manny kept his composure. He didn't yell or argue back. Instead, his eyes conveyed quiet strength. Suddenly, the officer pulled out his radio. "I'm going to need backup here," he announced. "This guy's not cooperating." The crowd's whispers grew louder. Phones continued to record, capturing every moment. Someone nearby called out, "Why are you harassing him? What's he done wrong?" The officer ignored the question and looked back at Manny. "You're coming with me for further questioning." Manny shook his head gently. "I haven't done anything wrong. I will not go with you without a clear reason. The situation was escalating fast. More people stopped to watch, some openly recording, others exchanging worried looks. The peaceful park was no longer a place of relaxation. It had turned into a tense stage for a confrontation between authority and a respected figure standing up against injustice. A woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice steady but loud enough for others to hear. You're abusing your power. This man hasn't done anything to deserve this treatment. The officer glanced at her, but said nothing. Manny's wife stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. Please, officer, this is humiliating for my family. Can we just go home? The officer ignored her plea and repeated his demand. You need to come with me. Manny's jaw tightened. He knew his next words would be important. He looked around at the growing crowd and then directly at the officer. I respect your job, but I will not allow myself to be humiliated or treated unfairly. I ask you to treat me with the same respect you give anyone else. A few bystanders clapped softly in support. The officer's face reddened. His authority was being questioned openly, and it clearly frustrated him. You think you're above the law? He spat. Manny's calm voice was clear and steady. I am a citizen. I follow the law. I ask you to do the same, without prejudice or bias. More phones raised to record. The officer looked around, realizing this was no longer just between him and Manny. It was becoming public. Then, a sudden shout came from the crowd. Hey, that's Manny Pacquiao, the world champion boxer and senator. Murmurs spread quickly. People nudged each other, whispering in disbelief. The officer, however, seemed unfazed. He crossed his arms and said, Fame doesn't give you special rights. The tension was palpable. Manny's family held hands tightly, the kids looking frightened but proud. The crowd watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Have you ever seen someone abused by authority? Comment below where you're watching this from, city and country. The crowd's murmurs grew louder as the officer's hostility intensified. His face flushed with frustration, his voice rising above the soft whispers. You're causing a scene, he barked. I'm warning you. Stop wasting my time, or I'll have to take action. Manny looked around at the faces surrounding him, some fearful, some supportive, others shocked. His wife gripped his arm tightly, her eyes filled with worry. Please, Manny, she whispered urgently. Let's just leave. This isn't worth it. The kids are scared. Manny's youngest child clung to his mother's skirt, wide-eyed and trembling. The tension was thick, like a storm about to break. But Manny knew that backing down now would mean allowing injustice to continue unchecked. He swallowed the fear rising in his chest and stood even taller. I understand your position, officer, Manny said, his voice calm but resolute. But I will not be intimidated or treated unfairly just because of how I look. The officer's eyes narrowed. You think you're better than me? Because you're famous? Manny shook his head slowly. No, I believe every person deserves respect and dignity. That includes you and me. The officer took a step closer, his tone growing threatening. You're making this worse for yourself. I'm giving you one last chance to cooperate. The crowd held its breath. The tension was palpable. The park, once a place of peace, had become a battlefield of wills. A man in the crowd stepped forward, holding up his phone. We're recording this. Don't you think you should calm down? Several others began to voice their support quietly, their presence giving Manny strength. Manny's wife wiped a tear from her cheek, while his older children looked on with a mixture of fear and admiration. Officer, Manny continued, I'm here peacefully with my family. If you have concerns, please express them respectfully, but I will not stand for harassment or threats. The officer's face twisted with anger. You don't get to lecture me. I'm the law here. But the law must be fair, Manny said softly, looking directly at the officer. Justice isn't about power or prejudice. It's about fairness. At that moment, the officer's radio crackled again. Backup was on its way. The officer glanced nervously toward the sound, realizing the situation was slipping beyond his control. Manny's family gathered close around him, their presence a silent pillar of support. You're making a mistake, the officer muttered. Suddenly, a whisper passed through the crowd, growing louder. That's Manny Pacquiao, the senator, the champion. Recognition dawned on many faces. Some gasped, others murmured in awe. But the officer still seemed reluctant to accept who he was dealing with. Fame won't save you now, the officer sneered. Manny remained composed. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for respect. For myself, my family, and for everyone. The crowd's support grew louder. A woman nearby shouted, "Enough of this harassment." The officer looked around, the weight of many eyes on him, and slowly stepped back. Manny took a deep breath, feeling the swell of courage and solidarity around him. Have you ever had to stand up against unfair treatment even when those around you wanted you to back down? Share your story or comment strength if you believe in standing your ground. As the murmurs grew louder, a sudden whisper spread through the crowd. That's Manny Pacquiao. The words rippled like a wave, moving from person to person. People stopped talking, their eyes widening in surprise. Phones were raised higher as more bystanders began recording, excitement mixing with the tension. A man near the front nudged his friend, whispering, "That's the world champion boxer, and he's a senator too." Another voice chimed in, "The man who's helped so many people with his charity work." Manny's calm demeanor didn't change, but inside, he felt a swell of responsibility. His fame had always been a tool to inspire and help others, but now, it might be the only thing standing between him and injustice. The officer, however, seemed oblivious to the growing recognition. He crossed his arms, his eyes still fixed on Manny with suspicion. So what? Fame doesn't mean you're above the law. The crowd's energy shifted. No longer just a random man facing harassment. Manny was a symbol, a figure of resilience and integrity. Whispers turned into conversations. "Can you believe this cop doesn't know who he's harassing?" someone muttered. A woman nearby gasped softly. "It's wrong to treat anyone like this, but especially someone like Manny." Manny's family stayed close, their nervousness mixed with pride. His wife squeezed his hand gently, offering silent encouragement. Despite the mounting pressure, Manny didn't use his fame as a shield. He stayed humble, his voice steady and respectful when he finally spoke. "I am honored to be recognized," he said quietly, "but I ask only for fairness and respect, as any person deserves." The officer's scowl deepened. His authority was challenged not just by Manny's words, but by the watching crowd. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Someone in the crowd called out, "Why are you treating him like a criminal when he's done nothing wrong?" More voices joined in. A few people took a step forward, their stance protective. The officer glanced around, realizing that this confrontation was no longer private. It had become a public matter, witnessed and recorded by dozens. "Stay back," he ordered, though his voice lacked the earlier confidence. Manny raised his hand slightly, signaling peace. "There's no need for hostility," he said. "Let's remember why we are here, to serve and protect everyone equally." A young boy in the crowd looked up at Manny with admiration. "You're so brave," he whispered to his mother. Manny smiled softly at the boy, then turned back to the officer. "I do not want to make this harder than it is," Manny said, "but I will not be silenced or mistreated because of bias." The officer's face tightened. He seemed to struggle between maintaining control and acknowledging the weight of the moment. Behind the officer, a few more police cars arrived, their presence adding another layer of tension. The crowd watched silently as the backup officers approached, some nodding respectfully toward Manny. The lead backup officer stepped forward and spoke quietly to the original officer, glancing at Manny's ID. "It's him," the backup officer said firmly. "You need to stand down." The original officer looked embarrassed, his posture slackening. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. Manny's family relaxed slightly, sensing the turning tide. The crowd erupted into soft applause, their respect and support evident. Manny took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and resolve. "This moment isn't about me," he said aloud, addressing the crowd. "It's about reminding us all that respect and justice must be for everyone." The crowd cheered, some chanting, "Respect! Respect!" The officer who started the confrontation said nothing more, stepping aside as the backup officers took charge. Manny's wife pulled their children close, smiling with pride. Though the confrontation was far from over, the mood had shifted. The community had witnessed a powerful stand against injustice, and the message was clear: no one should be judged by their appearance or status. The tension hung heavy in the air as the crowd looked on, waiting to see what would happen next. The police officer who had confronted Manny moments ago still carried the sting of embarrassment, but he wasn't ready to back down just yet. His eyes burned with frustration, but Manny's calm presence was unshakable. The officer took a step forward, his voice sharp. "You think you can just talk to me like that? You're not above the law. No one is." Manny looked him squarely in the eye. "I am not asking to be above the law," he said firmly. "I am asking to be treated fairly and without prejudice. I am asking that justice be applied equally to everyone." The officer scoffed. "You don't know what you're talking about." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some people shouted their support for Manny. Others simply watched in silence, feeling the weight of the moment. Phones were still recording, the entire encounter captured in real time. Manny's voice grew stronger, yet never angry. "This isn't about me being famous or powerful. It's about a basic human right, the right to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of your skin color or background." He glanced at the officer, his gaze steady and unwavering. Racial profiling and discrimination have no place in law enforcement or society. They hurt individuals, families, and communities. They tear us apart. The officer looked taken aback. For the first time, the crowd sensed a crack in his armor. A few bystanders nodded, murmuring their agreement. One woman said aloud, "He's right. This is not how we should treat each other." Manny continued, addressing the crowd now as much as the officer. "We all deserve to live without fear of being judged unfairly. I stand here not only for myself, but for every person who has faced injustice." The energy in the crowd shifted. What had started as a confrontation was becoming a moment of reckoning. The officer's face reddened. His attempts to intimidate were failing against Manny's calm authority. He struggled to maintain control. Manny raised his hand slightly, signaling peace. "Let's turn this situation into a lesson, one about respect, equality, and unity." A woman near the front clapped softly, encouraging others to join. Soon, the crowd was applauding in support. The original officer took a deep breath, clearly uncomfortable under the watchful eyes of the crowd and the backup officers who had arrived earlier. One of the arriving officers spoke quietly to his colleague. "We need to handle this carefully." The officer who had confronted Manny looked around, realizing the tide had turned. His earlier confidence gave way to embarrassment. Manny's wife smiled gently and whispered, "You did well." Manny nodded but kept his focus on the officer. "I hope this moment reminds us all, respect is not optional. It is necessary." The crowd cheered, some chanting respect. Respect, while others took to their phones to live stream and share the story online. Manny's children, once nervous and scared, now stood a little taller, sensing their father's strength. The officer finally lowered his voice and said, "I'm sorry if you felt mistreated." Manny nodded graciously. "Thank you. Apologies are a good first step. Now let's work towards change." Backup officers began speaking with witnesses and taking notes. The atmosphere started to calm, but the impact of the moment lingered. As the crowd dispersed slowly, many stopped to thank Manny for standing up with dignity. This confrontation was more than just a clash. It was a powerful statement against racial profiling and abuse of power. Manny's message was clear. Standing up for justice requires courage, calm, and respect. No matter the odds, the tension in the park began to ease. A hush fell over the crowd. The backup officers were now fully engaged, speaking calmly with witnesses and reviewing Manny's identification. Suddenly, one of the officers looked up and addressed the crowd. "Everyone, this man is Senator Manny Pacquiao, world-renowned boxer, philanthropist, and public servant," the officer announced clearly. The crowd erupted into applause and cheers. People who were already supportive became even more energized, some chanting Manny's name. Phones raised higher, live streaming the moment for viewers around the world. Manny's family smiled, visibly relieved as they saw the shift in the atmosphere. The original officer who had confronted Manny looked around, his face turning a deep shade of red. His earlier bravado had evaporated completely. The realization hit him. He had just harassed one of the most respected figures in the country, a man known for humility and courage. The crowd's mood changed from tension to a sense of triumph. People stepped forward to thank Manny for his strength and grace under pressure. One woman in the crowd called out, "You showed everyone what true courage looks like." Another added, "This is why respect matters, no matter who you are." Manny took a deep breath and addressed everyone present, his voice calm but powerful. "I am grateful for your support," he said. "But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us standing together against injustice. He paused, letting his words sink in. We must remember that every person deserves respect, no matter their background or appearance. Humility and kindness are our greatest strengths. The crowd nodded, some wiping tears, moved by Manny's message. The embarrassed officer lowered his eyes and muttered, I didn't know. Manny approached him gently and said, It's not about knowing who I am. It's about treating everyone with fairness. The officer looked up, a mix of regret and humility on his face. Backup officers placed a gentle hand on the original officer's shoulder and spoke quietly, indicating that consequences would follow for his behavior. Manny's family gathered around him, proud but focused on the bigger picture. The crowd continued to cheer and applaud, many vowing to share the story far and wide. As social media lit up with videos and comments praising Manny's dignity and courage, the incident quickly went viral. News outlets began covering the story, highlighting the powerful message about respect, justice, and standing up to abuse. Manny remained humble, using the attention to advocate for fairness and equality. This moment is a reminder, Manny said in an interview later, that no one should ever be judged by their appearance or background. We must stand united against discrimination. The crowd began to disperse slowly, but the impact of the event lingered, a powerful example of courage, humility, and justice prevailing. What would you have done if you were in Manny's shoes? Comment below with respect if you stand against injustice. The incident in the park quickly became more than just a local event. It exploded across social media platforms and news outlets worldwide. Videos captured by bystanders showed Manny Pacquiao standing calm and dignified in the face of unfair treatment, refusing to back down despite the police officer's hostility. Millions of people watched, shared, and commented, praising Manny for his courage and grace. The hashtag Respect for Manny trended across social media, inspiring conversations about racial profiling, justice, and dignity. News anchors replayed the footage, discussing the incident on live television. Experts weighed in on the importance of treating everyone with fairness and called for reforms in law enforcement practices. Manny's story became a symbol of hope and resilience for many who had experienced similar injustices. Meanwhile, the police officer who had harassed Manny faced internal investigations. His actions were widely condemned, and disciplinary measures were announced to hold him accountable. The department issued a public apology to Manny and his family, acknowledging the misconduct. Despite the chaos, Manny remained humble and focused on the bigger picture. In interviews and public appearances, he emphasized that this wasn't just about one man's experience. It was a call to action for society to change. I am grateful for the support, Manny said. But the real victory is when no one else has to face what I went through. When respect and justice are the norm for everyone, regardless of race, status, or background. Manny used his platform to advocate for equality and respect. He urged people everywhere to stand up against injustice and support one another with kindness and empathy. The incident sparked community discussions and inspired many to share their own stories of standing up to unfair treatment. It became a rallying cry for change, showing that courage and dignity can make a difference. Through it all, Manny's family stood by his side, proud of how he handled the situation. His children learned firsthand about resilience, respect, and the importance of standing up for what is right. As the story continued to spread, Manny's message echoed far beyond the park, reaching homes, schools, and communities worldwide. If you believe no one should be judged by their appearance, type respect in the comments below, share this story with your friends, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.